in Arizona, undergraduate school at ASU, and then law school in Texas. I came back as a young lawyer and got started in Chandler. Having been raised in a military family, it was always instilled in me that I should give back to the community, and I did in Chandler. I got involved. At that time, there was corruption in the police department and in the courts. I got involved with a couple other young lawyers, and as a result of that, at age 27, I was appointed the presiding judge of the Chandler Municipal Court, and I served in that capacity for 6 years. Then folks in Chandler encouraged me to run for the legislature, which I did. I was the chairman of the House Environment Committee, where I sponsored numerous pieces of legislation protecting our environment, including preventing from Arizona from becoming the dumping ground for hazardous waste in the United States, legislation protecting our mountains, our rivers, and our native plants. I then went back to Chandler, and then in 1999, I was appointed by Governor Hall to the commission. I served as 9 years as a commissioner, 1999 to 2008. I was chair of the commission in 2001 and 2. And I want to get back to the commission. I couldn't run again because of term limits in 2009 or 2008. But I want to get back to the commission to protect Arizona families from nonstop, unjustified rate increases, make Arizona the solar capital of the world, and stop the dark money spending by the utilities that has led to corruption at the commission and the corrupting of our democracy in general, and to those nonstop rate increases.
And in these heightened times, this election is getting a lot more attention than it may have done in previous election cycles. Can you tell us a little bit more about the responsibilities of the commission itself and what what role a commissioner plays in shaping how those responsibilities are carried out?
Well, that's a great question. You know, the commission has been called the most powerful entity in state government that most people know little or nothing about. So I'm so glad we're doing this town hall today. The way I describe it is, if you turn on your light or use air conditioning, cook or heat with natural gas, cross a railroad crossing, buy gasoline from a gas station, still have a landline, take a shower or flush a toilet, invest in stocks or bonds or other financial instruments, care about fighting climate change, and care about whether we build coal plants, which I'm not suggesting, or natural gas plants, or we have solar energy in Arizona, or you're concerned about where gigantic transmission lines are located in Arizona, the commission has impacted your lives. That's the broad jurisdiction of the commission. The Corporation Commission is very, very unique. It was called the Railroad Commission in territorial days. We're one of only 7 states where the commission is established in the state constitution. It's considered a fourth branch of government. And we're one of only 13 states where the commissioners are elected statewide. This is like running for governor or secretary of state or attorney general. In the other 37 states, the commissioners are appointed by the governor and normally confirmed by the state senate. And so, again, the name of the commission is very misleading. In other states, for your viewers that are new to Arizona, in other states, it's called the Public Utilities Commission or the Public Service Commission. So the name is very misleading. It's certainly where you start businesses, an LLC or incorporate, but it has all that other jurisdiction that I talked about.
Well, in this election, now, one of the reasons why this election may be getting more attention than usual is that we finally have an opportunity, Democrats finally have an opportunity to take a majority on the commission. So there are 6 candidates right now running, just for a bit of background for people. So there are 6 candidates running for 3 seats. 3 of those are Republicans. So we have 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And of the Republicans who are running, there's Eric Sloan, Leah Marquez Peterson, and Jim O'Connor, who's actually a Republican, but is a write-in candidate. Now, Sloan and Marquez Peterson both have long histories of taking money from APS. And Jim O'Connor, his last-minute bid to get on the ballot was simply to prevent one Democrat from winning automatically a seat to fill up the Republican slot. Can you tell us why it is that Republicans are so determined and so desperate to maintain their majority on the board, and what do you believe will happen if they're able to maintain that majority after 2020?
Well, let me just say this. I think it's helpful for people. I use these numbers. I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There are 5 commissioners statewide. There are 4 Republican commissioners right now. As you noted, there are 3 spots open in November. There are 3 Democrats running. We're running as the solar team. You can vote for all 3 of us. And there are 3 Republicans running. And this is the only statewide office. There's obviously a race for the U.S. Senate with Mark Kelly, but there's no other statewide race, no race for governor, attorney general, secretary of state, mine inspector, public instruction, et cetera. And so this is a very, very important election. Why do the Republicans? Well, the Republicans have been in power at the commission. They've held the majority since 1998. You think about that. They've been in power since 1998, and that has led to, like I said, nonstop rate increases for the utilities. To answer your question simply, they want to hold on to their power. They've been in power for 22 years. They want to hold on to it. So this is a very crucial election coming forward. As you noted, both Eric Sloan and Marquez Peterson have ties to APS. Pinnacle West is the holding company of APS, the parent company. They both have very close ties to the utility. Eric Sloan ran the dark money campaign against Tom Chabin and I and me when I ran in 2016, and they spent millions of dollars to beat us. And so he was the chair of that dark money campaign that was paid for by APS, and he received thousands of dollars in money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Marquez Peterson, when she ran for Congress last year in 2018, she received thousands of dollars from APS executives, Pinnacle West executives, and their PAC. So that's how closely tied they are. And this is really just a repeat of what's been occurring in the last few election cycles, where the utilities spend millions to elect utility-friendly commissioners who then turn around and raise rates nonstop. I've called it a cycle of corruption, because they elect these utility-friendly commissioners who then raise rates. Then the utility takes some of that extra money they're making and spend it on the next campaign to elect commissioners in the next election. So that's how closely tied they are to APS and Pinnacle West.
Mm-hmm. Now some of our viewers may be aware, may not be aware, that you actually, the last time you served on the Arizona Corporation Commission, you were a Republican yourself. Can you tell us when you made that change and what prompted that switch and that change to run as a Democrat? Well,
the decision was really both personal and then based on public policy. I changed in 2015. As I noted a second ago, I was the one of the Democratic nominees for the Corporation Commission in 2016. I lost by 0.07%, less than 1%. To put that in perspective, Hillary lost by 3.5% in 2016. I was actually winning up until the last 2 weeks of the election, because we've now seen Commissioner Kennedy, who's the chair of my campaign, issued subpoenas against APS and Pinnacle West to provide documents. And we've now seen the polling that they were doing. They were really, I've said, APS and Pinnacle West were a political machine masquerading, as a public utility. But to get back to your question, I changed in 2015, personally, based on personal reasons. My wife, Barbara, was the first woman presiding judge in Maricopa County, the first Latina, first and only person of color. And from the day that she was sworn in, Joe Arpaio attacked her, our family, and even her 80-year-old father, who served in the U.S. Army as a sergeant and was the foreman of his steel mill. But from the day one, we were harassed. We had cars following her and me and her 80-year-old father. Not one Republican stood up for her. In fact, just the opposite occurred. This was in 2010 when Joe Arpaio, I know he just lost in the primary, but this was when he was at the peak of his popularity and power. And not one Republican stood up for my wife. And in fact, just the opposite occurred. They were trying to get the support of Joe Arpaio when they were running for office. So that's the personal reason. Mm-hmm. On a public policy perspective, all of those environmental pieces of legislation that I wrote protecting Arizona's environment, I did that all as a Republican.
Right.
The Republicans no longer believe in protecting the environment, in my opinion. They don't believe in climate change. I wrote what are called the REST rules when I was a Republican. REST rules stand for Renewable Energy Standard Tariff when I was a commissioner. They require our utilities to get 15% of their electricity from solar and wind and geothermal and other sources. The Republicans on the commission after I left and my colleagues left, and Senator Kennedy lost in 2014 when APS spent $10 million to beat her. They gutted everything we did to encourage renewable energy in Arizona. And so those are really the main reasons. A, personal with my wife and my family. B, public policy. And then my parents were, I was raised as a Republican. As I said, I was raised in a military family. My dad served on Eisenhower's staff during World War II. And so as a young person, I started out as a Republican, but that's why I changed.
Yeah, I understand. Completely understandable. Now, I know homeowners are going to be watching this election pretty closely, especially those with solar, who rely on solar. This election is going to have a huge impact on their energy prices. Can you explain to us a little bit more about APS net metering and how it has impacted solar energy consumers in Arizona?
Well, let me digress for a second. One of the things we did when I was a chair and then when I was a commissioner is we wanted to encourage the installation of rooftop solar. And we did that in a number of ways. We had rebates on the front end, whereas if you installed rooftop solar on your home or your business, you got a rebate depending on the size of the unit and the cost of the unit. And then additionally, once your unit was installed, we had what you referred to as net metering. And what net metering means for your viewers is if you generated more electricity at your home from your solar unit than you used, and you put money back on the grid for all the rest of us to use, you got a dollar for dollar credit. APS did away with that. They convinced the commission, and in fact, that occurred. I always say it's kind of interesting when that vote occurred. As I said, I lost in 2016 by less than 1%. The Republican commissioners in December of 2016 is when they held the vote because they didn't want to do it before the election. So they did it right after the election in 2016, and they did away with net metering. Right. So it's made it much, much more difficult from a financial perspective for people to install rooftop solar. And what I tell people is, and I think this is important because what the utilities have done is they've tried to pit solar versus non-solar homeowners against each other. But what I tell people is, and this is the dirty little secret of rate making these are government created monopolies. As we know, you don't have a choice, where you get your electricity or your natural gas or up near where you all are, a private sewer or water company. You don't have a choice, it's where you live. And so the way rates are set for utilities is if they build stuff. So if they build a power plant, or if they build a transmission line, or if they build a substation, or if they build the wires to your house, or if a water company builds pipes, they then get to come to the commission and ask that rates be raised. Right. If more people are building rooftop solar, that means that the utilities, APS and the other electric utilities, don't have to build power plants or transmission lines. And that means rates will stabilize or come down. Right. And so not only will solar homeowners benefit, but non-solar homeowners will benefit because the solar homeowners are putting electricity back on the grid, as I said, for all of us to use. The utilities are not building stuff, so they can't come to the commission and ask that rates be raised. And I think that's very important because a lot of times the utilities, in fact, in the last election, when 127, was on the ballot, and prior to that, they tried to pit solar homeowners against non-solar homeowners.
Well, you sold me. I'm actually in the process of building a home right now and making the exact decision as to what do we do? Do we install solar panels? What do we do? This is the decision I'm making right now. So yeah, it would be great to be able to get more benefit from the investment you make in solar panels and not feel penalized for doing this. You totally won me with that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not easy.
So now your platform, renewables are they're a passion for you. And one of your goals is to make Arizona carbon neutral by 2050. Do you mind telling our readers, a little bit more about how you hope to achieve that if you gain a seat on the Arizona Corporation Commission?
Well, as I said in my opening, Arizona should be the solar capital of the world. It's sort of ridiculous that with 330 days of electricity, we've fallen so far behind in the rooftop solar installation. And let me just give you an example. When we passed those renewable energy standard, the REST rules that I co-authored in 2006, Arizona was a leader in rooftop solar. We were only behind Florida and California, which makes sense, because of per capita of the population. We've now, if you can believe this, fallen behind New Jersey in rooftop solar installation. And that's because everything we just talked about, where the Republicans have gutted everything that I did with my colleagues when I was there. How are we going to achieve that? As I said, we want to get to Commissioner Kennedy has a proposal. What I wrote, as I said, were called the REST rules. Hers are called the CREST rules with a K. Her original proposal was 50% by the year 228. There's now a proposal with Commissioner Kennedy and Commissioner Burns, who is a Republican. They have a joint proposal to make it 50% renewables by 2030, and then, as you said, 250 clean energy by 250. And so we've got to have interim standards, goals. I should say requirements, and we did in the REST rules. It didn't start out at 15%. It started out at 1%, and then went to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need to do the same thing in the new proposal, and so we're not sitting in year 2029 and saying, oh well, we're still only at 16%. So we're going to encourage that. We're going to do things to encourage it, as I talked about with you asked about net metering earlier and rebates. And then I think it's important to also because one of the misleading statements by our opponents is the cost of solar. And that might have been true years ago when I was on the commission. And that's why we wanted to jumpstart the industry. But now solar is actually cheaper than coal. And that's just not saying that. There's actually data and a concrete example of that. In Colorado, Xcel is the biggest utility in Colorado. It's like APS, Arizona Public Service, or Salt River Project. It's got millions of customers. They recently went out to bid in Colorado on the wholesale market because no utility generates enough electricity in-house. They do about 80%, but on a day like today when it's 116 out, they've got to go out on the open market and buy that excess electricity so it would keep the air conditioning and lights on. So they went out on the open market in Colorado and solar with battery backup. So what's the problem with solar? Obviously, when it's not sunny out or at nighttime. So solar with battery backup came back cheaper than coal. Not only are we going to encourage it with policies, but just the pure economics are going to get us there. And we're going to, and we've fallen behind, all of our surrounding states. At one time, like I said, we were a leader. I think New Mexico just, passed legislation to make it 100% renewables, and Hawaii and all the states around us. And like I said, at one time we were a leader, and we need to be a leader again and be the solar capital of the world.
Yeah, you're running on a platform of ethics and transparency, and you want to end ending rate fixing by utilities that you say unfairly disadvantage energy customers. Can you tell us a little bit more about what transparency and ethics mean to you?
Well, the commission recently adopted a quote-unquote code of ethics, which I've said there are so many loopholes in it that you could drive a Mack truck through it. And what do I mean by that? One of my running mates says that, I like her phrase. She says, "No more freebies," from the utilities. And I spell it out. I say, no gifts, no food, no beverages, no paying for hotels, no travel, etc. And that can still exist. That needs to be done away with in the code of ethics. It needs to be amended and strengthened. We need to stop what I call the revolving door at the commission, where commissioners and high-level executives leave the commission and then go immediately and work for APS and other utilities that they just were regulating. So we need to strengthen the code of ethics. We need to go back and hopefully, and that's why it's so important to turn the legislature blue. what happened when Governor Ducey appointed one of the commissioner, he couldn't even serve because he had a conflict of interest. So they had to go to the legislature. The Republicans weakened the conflict of interest law for corporation commissioners so that commissioner could serve. So we need to go back and strengthen it. If they don't do it legislatively, we'll do it in our code of ethics. And you're talking about, I talked about the cycle of corruption a little while ago, where they spend millions. I guess I alluded to it. They spent $10 million to beat Commissioner Kennedy in 14, millions of dollars to beat Tom Chabon and me in 16. We need to put an end to that. And what we need to do is to stop the dark money spending by the utilities. Not only the dark money spending, the disclosed money, all money spent by utilities on corporation commission races. It's really unseemly if you think about it, that the commissioners are basically getting elected by the very utilities they're supposed to be regulating, and that's led to these nonstop, unjustified rate increases. And it can be done. The Public Utilities Commission in Michigan put a stop to spending by their major utilities in political races. So it can be done. You just have to have the will and the backbone to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, as he mentioned, APS and Pinnacle West did spend a lot of money to defeat you in 2016. Now they're on record, at least, saying that they will not spend any money on any candidates in this election cycle. Now, first of all, it's a two-part question. I mean, first of all, do you actually believe them? And second of all, what if anything will you do about past dark money contributions from APS, Pinnacle West to previous Arizona Corporation Commission candidates?
Well, the proof will be in the pudding, but whether they actually spend or not. But there's a lot of ways to get involved in campaigns. I mean, the APS Pinnacle West spends a lot of money on different organizations throughout the state, and then they get those organizations to back their preferred candidates. So even though it's not a direct expenditure, it's an indirect expenditure. And I hate to say this to nonprofits and other organizations and the chambers around the state to get involved in commission races. So we'll see. And I think it's important to note, though, they're still involved in legislative races and other political races in the state. I mean, we've seen the money being spent, and that's why it's so important, as I said a second ago, to elect Democrats to the legislature going forward. So we'll see if that actually occurs or not. But we can, as I said a second ago, put an end to it by issuing an order. And the reason commissioners are called commissioners, they're like judges. They order utilities to do things they might not want to otherwise do that the commissioners think are in the public interest. And one of them was, when I first got to the commission, the utilities weren't investing in renewable energy, solar, wind, anything. They just said, oh yeah, we'll think about it, and we think it's a great idea, but they weren't doing it. So we had to order them to do it. The same thing with this dark money, spending, dark money and disclosed spending by the utilities. We're going to have to order them not to do it. We need to get there to help Commissioner Kennedy, because I said she issued a subpoena, and we found out there have been a lot of newspaper reports about their spending. We now have seen the documents that they were heavily involved, and like I said a second ago, they were a political machine masquerading as a public utility. I don't even know how they had time to run the utility, because they were so involved in the campaign that they were deciding where signs. They would say, we need more signs in Cave Creek, or we need more signs in Carefree, or we need more signs in Gilbert. That's how involved the executives of APS and Pinnacle West were in the elections.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is still going to be a tough race. So the unofficial primary results show that Democrat turnout was up over previous election cycles, but Republican total vote count is still higher. Now, just as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 open seats. If at least 2 Democrats manage to gain seats on the commission, it will shift the majority over to Democrats. At this point, what if people want to support your bid for a seat on the commission? How best can they support you at this particular time in your campaign?
Well, you know what, it is going to be a tough race. It was a tough race when I ran in 16. I think it might have been easier psychologically to lose by, a lot more. Like I said, I lost by 0.07%, less than 1%. And what I tell people is, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, you should be concerned about the undue influence that the utilities have had on the commission over the last 6 or 7 years that have led to the nonstop rate increases, the crushing of rooftop solar. So I ask everyone, for their vote, whether they're a Democrat, or Republican, or an independent. That will help tremendously. Vote for all three. Vote for all three. It's very important. You can vote for all three. There's 3 spots open. We're all running as clean election candidates, which means we're not taking any money from utilities or their lawyers, their lobbyists, their executives. But what that means is we have to use things like we're doing here today, social media, and getting the word out. And please, send this out to on your social media platforms, your email lists, and Instagram and Facebook, et cetera, and Twitter, et cetera, because that will help us tremendously getting the word out. If you want signs, you can go to our platform, joint platform, solarteam2020.com. It then will send you, if you want to go and learn more about each one of us, it'll send you to our individual websites, but then we'll be able to get yard signs to you. Our joint signs are going up. They just started going up recently, and we have yard signs to distribute. That will help tremendously. And just word of mouth and letting people know, again, whether your friends are independents or Republicans, let them know that these are government created monopolies. Rate increases are like tax increases because you don't have a choice. And that's been going on, like I said, the Republicans have controlled the commission for 22 years.
Yeah. And those other 2 candidates, just for anybody watching. So that is Shay Stansfield and that is Anna Tovar, correct?
Correct.
The other 2 Democrats that'll be appearing on the ballot in November, and are also part of, your Team Solar. So we've got a couple of questions here. So I'm going to now I've got a question from Phil. Phil, I don't know if Phil's okay with being on camera or not. He hasn't indicated, but if you are, Phil, let me know. But he was wondering about comparing. How do you compare solar generation to natural gas? That was his question.
Well, that's a great question. When I was on the commission, back in 1999 to 2008, natural gas prices skyrocketed. And they were very, very high at that time. They've obviously come down recently. And so it really depends on what's going on in the market. At that time, even solar back then, because the skyrocketing prices of natural gas was cheaper, as I talked about. Now, natural gas is a little cheaper than solar, but solar is coming down, and becoming more efficient with the batteries and the construction materials. And so it really depends on what year you're talking about. But going forward, just from a climate change perspective, renewables are going to be in our future. And then somebody noted on one of that we have signs at the LD1 office. I should say that somebody in the chat.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the name, but they said there's signs. All 3 our signs are at the LD1 office. Yeah,
that came from Ruth. Yeah, she says we have Bill's yard signs at the LD1 office. Pickup time start next week. Ruth, where is the LD1 office? Do you mind sharing in the chat so we can just let everybody know where the LD1 office is so they can go pick those up? In the meantime, we have another question though from Clay. He wants to know, he says, anything that gets dark money and utilities out of politics is clearly a win. It's slowing down adaptation. How much money do candidates need to be competitive? So not much as a question, but more of a comment if you wanted to had anything to say to Clay about that.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, I've been a victim of the dark money spending, and so was Commissioner Kennedy in 14 and then in 16. And as I said, it's corrupted our democracy, and it's corrupted the commission. And at the very least, we need disclosure. And even Justice Scalia, who I normally don't agree with, when they did this, when they decided the Citizens United case and a companion case, said we needed disclosure, but he left it up to Congress and the state legislatures. And some state legislatures have passed very strict disclosure laws, and not just Democratic legislatures. In Montana, which I would consider, a purple state because they have one Republican U.S. Senator and one Democrat. Hopefully there'll be 2 in November. But having said that, they passed very strict disclosure laws. So did California. What did we do here in Arizona? We made it even, the legislature a couple of years ago made it even easier to hide the dark money. That's why this race is even more important, because the dark money initiative by Terry Goddard isn't going to be on the ballot because they didn't get the signatures. But there's a lot of things the commission can do because most of the dark money comes from APS, Pinnacle West, and the utilities. There's some from other organizations, but most of it comes. So we can do a lot to at least get the ball rolling to stop dark money in Arizona.
Yeah. So Ruth says the LD1 office is on the corner of Carefree and 27th Street. And she also gives a shout out for the Facebook group AZ LD1 Dems for times when the offices will be open. So if anybody's interested in collecting yard signs, then they can grab them from the LD1 office.
And I think Shay probably, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I think Shay might have her there. If she doesn't, I'll let her know, and I'll let Anna know also, because we are running as the solar team. It's very important to vote for all three of us because if only one of us gets elected, we're not going to be able to make a change there. The Republicans will control it. And if I could add, we're all talking about increasing renewable energy, and I bet if I went around this virtual table today, everyone would say, yeah, we need to increase it from 15% that you wrote, Bill, to a higher percentage. Our Republican opponents they don't even want to keep the 15% in place. They want to do away with the requirement of 15% and just make it a suggestion to the utilities and not a requirement.
And the other factor, I suppose, is jobs, because solar is a big job. It's a job generator. The number of jobs in solar have been decreasing as the tax from the state and federal on the solar industry, from solar installers to, yeah. Do you know offhand how many jobs are created by the solar industry in Arizona?
The last time I looked, there were tens of thousands, and you're right, they've gone down. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I talked about earlier government created monopoly. So we have this government created monopoly that the Republicans, they always talk about competition, but here we have no competition, and they're passing policies that are crushing small businesses, the solar industry, the small businesses that are competing to install rooftop solar, and the installers and everything that goes with it. I find it extremely ironic and hypocritical when they talk about supporting competition and free enterprise, but they're supporting a government-created monopoly.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments for Bill here? If I see anybody, but now your website is, I've got it right here. What's your website? It's right behind me, Mundell2020.com. And if anybody's interested in going to read more about your positions and your platform, they can go there. And what is the website for Team Solar? Is it teamsolar.com?
No, it's solarteam2020.com.
Okay.
And then I also, Facebook, Bill Mundell for Corporation Commission, and I actually put a lot of good information about what's going on at the commission. It really isn't much about me and what a great guy I am and what a great candidate I am. It's more about the issues. I mean, we recently posted about the railroad derailment in Tempe and the collapse of the bridge and the fire. And the commission, as I noted in our opening, has responsibility for railroad tracks and railroad crossings. And then pipeline safety, the pipes that go to gas stations and our homes with natural gas. And so I put a lot of information on there that talks about the commission and the issues that are occurring at the commission. And then I have Twitter at Mundell Bill, where I do the same thing.
Now, Chris does have a question here. He's asked, what's your vision for Arizona infrastructure 10 years from now?
Well, my vision is that we have microgrids. Instead of building, gigantic transmission lines coming down from the Navajo Nation into the metropolitan area to provide electricity to us, that we have microgrids with solar and wind throughout Arizona. The military bases right now, the Marine Air Base in Yuma and then Fort Huachuca down in southern Arizona, they have their own grid, their microgrids for defense purposes. They're still connected on the grid that we're connected on, the national grid. But for defense purposes, they have a microgrid on the bases in case the national grid goes down. I see that from an infrastructure standpoint. I see having charging stations for electric vehicles going forward. I mean, that's very important. So I see those are some of the things off the top of my head that I see from an infrastructure standpoint, and less reliance on having to build big, gigantic transmission lines. As I said earlier, I grew up at Hayden and Shea. north of Shea was all desert. McCormick Ranch, I'll show my age. I mean, McCormick Ranch was a ranch. Gainey Ranch was a ranch. But that gigantic transmission line down Shea Boulevard to go out to Fountain Hills, I mean, that no one wanted it. I mean, and so the citizens of Scottsdale didn't want it. So what happened was the legislature took away the authority from cities and towns and counties to site transmission lines over 69 kV and gave it to the commission. And so that's my vision. I see microgrids. I see electric charging stations in our future.
And Yvonne has a question. She's asking, how have Trump's tariffs increased the cost of solar?
Well, two things. Because it reminded me, in that tax bill that was passed by the Republican Congress and signed by President Trump, it reduced tax incentives for rooftop solar on a gradual declining basis. That needs to be restored going forward. And I say and I'll answer the question, but it's a three-legged stool when it comes to rooftop solar installation. And as you said, you're looking at it installing now. We had the federal tax credits, right, on the federal government. We had state tax credits, and then we had what we talked about earlier with the rebates from the commission and net metering, that's all gone away, and the federal being reduced. And the tariffs, it's my understanding, and I don't claim to be an expert on it, but it has driven up the price of installation, and hopefully that will come down in January.
Yeah.
With a new Congress and a new president.
Yeah, here.
So what's in January for installation?
Yeah, my understanding of the federal tariffs, I know I've looked into it, that this is almost effectively the end of this year. This year will be the last year, and then it drops, I think, down to something almost a derisory level in 2021. That 2020 is the last year. I think I can't remember the exact figures. It might be 6 or 10%. And
it went down last December. I mean, it was reduced last December. Like you said, it's going to be reduced again this December. And they're out there doing this stuff, kind of, here, look at the shiny ball over here, and then they're doing this stuff all over the place. They just lessened the methane gas emissions, or they're attempting to lessen the methane gas emission requirements. And so it's really concerning what they're doing to the environment.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, we hope that you, all the best in 2020, and to all of the 3 Democrats who are running for the commission. As right now, we've got 1 Democrat, Sandra Kennedy, who's on the commission, and hopefully we can add at least 2, and hopefully 3 more for a majority, and can start putting to right some of these issues that, whether it's solar or infrastructure, and some of these things that the Corporation Commission has authority to work in. So again, that's Mundell2020.com, and that's Team Solar 2020.
Solar Team 2020.
Solar Team 2020. Don't worry. I'll add a link on the Facebook page for all of those, including your Twitter and your Facebook, so people can follow up with you and keep track of your progress.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this, and have a lovely rest of your day and a good weekend, a safe weekend.
Thank you, Black Mountain Democrats and Black Mountain News. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good day. Bye-bye.